Good evening. I'm Bill Cohen, and tonight is another one of our conversations regarding caregiving, dementia, or whatever else we want to talk about tonight. And I'm very happy to welcome Alison van Schie from up on Vancouver Island. And let me tell you a little bit about it, but glad you could be here, Alison.
Thanks, Bill. Great to see you again.
Yes, we have visited in person. We are fortunate. So Allison has a background in social work spanning 25 plus years in 4 provinces in Canada. She now lives on beautiful Vancouver Island. As you can see, she's got a modest example here. Allison has worked with seniors in the community and in long-term care, as well as with individuals and families in varying roles, amassing vast experiences and a diverse skill set. In 2019, she moved beyond her career as a social worker and became a caregiver consultant and founded alongside caregiver consulting. Through her business, she provides services to caregivers whose loved one, friend, or family member is living with dementia or has a chronic illness. She also works with seniors facing challenges as they age. With her business, her goal is to come alongside caregivers to help them know they have someone on their side and are not alone in their caregiving journey. That is very important. She does have a big heart, but no magic wand, as she likes to say. In addition, she is the host of the Island Treasures podcast, as you can see, and the co-host of the Self Caregiving Strategies podcast with Teresa Wilbanks. And I've had the pleasure of being on Island Treasures. And if you missed it, I posted the link in the event in the Facebook group. So welcome again, my friend. In your own words, beyond what I just talked about, who is Alison van Schie?
Great question. Let's start with that. I don't want to dive right into what I do. I do want to tell you a little bit about me. And it's great that we've met in person because you know a little bit about me. But I'm described as a high energy person. And personally, I don't see that, but people other than me see it. So I like to bring joy to people. I like to be an encourager. I do have an energy. I guess I'm an extrovert, but I do also like to recharge my batteries and just withdraw a little bit. So I'm a wife and a mother. I've been a wife for over 40 years. And I bring that up because my husband and I made an agreement early on in our marriage that we would follow his career. And that's going to lend into what I'm going to talk about a little bit today. Following his career meant that my career took a back seat, but yeah, we'll talk about that a little bit more. So that's who I am. And I love working with people. Back to my husband, we're opposites, complete opposites. He's a very scientific, analytical type, and I'm a very social, creative type. So
and I
that's
can
who we are.
So tell us a little bit more about yourself and how about your own caregiving journey leading to you becoming a caregiver consultant.
Well, I'm actually going to talk a little bit more about my background because
Please do.
When we moved around, or when we followed my husband's career, we moved around a lot. And that meant I had to find new jobs. My kids had to find new schools. Well, they didn't have to find them. They were placed in new schools. We had to get a new house when we moved around. And but the fact that I was in the social services field meant there was usually a job available for me. And so I took on different jobs such as child welfare, financial welfare. I even worked in corrections, both inside a jail and out in the community. I gained skills from all of these. I worked as a medical social worker, and in the final stage of my social work career, I worked in a long-term care home. And I'd never worked with elders before that point. And when I stepped into that role, it was like I found where I was meant to be. There was an instant fit. And I realized, though, that as I worked with the residents in the care home, I recognized that there was a deficit in supports for the family and the caregivers. And so a seed was sown in the back of my mind that caregivers need more supports. So I would work with the families, but my priority was always the resident in the care home. When the family would come into my office, I'd give them information about the Alzheimer's Society. I'd give them the information sheets from the Alzheimer's Society, and I'd give them the help link phone number for the Alzheimer's Society. And basically, they were on their own at that point. So that seed set in my mind, and it grew. And then when we moved to Vancouver Island, when my husband retired, I started volunteering with a dementia group, and it was a lot like your Memory Cafe, Bill, where it's a couple. There's a caregiver and the care recipient, and they come and there's a program, and I was volunteering for this program, but it was only for early stage dementia. So I remember one fellow who was the caregiver, and his wife, who was a beautiful woman, but she was sort of nasty towards him unless they were in a social setting. So he enjoyed being in the social setting. And her dementia had advanced, and they were escorted out of the program. But when he was told they were no longer eligible for the program, his eyes locked on mine. He didn't know me. He just knew me as a volunteer, but they locked on mine. He was saying, "Help. What do I do? I'm panicked. My support system's being completely taken away from me, eroded, and I'm going to have to look after my wife, who's not kind to me alone." He was telling me all of this just by searing his eyes on mine. And so at that very moment, I thought, I have to do something. I never worked with him. I never saw him again. But adding to the seed that was sown when I worked in the residential care home, I thought, I've got to do something. So that leads to the question you just asked. What's my caregiving story? I didn't realize I had one, but I took training with Denise Brown of the Caregiving Years Training Academy. And part of the training to become a caregiver consultant meant that I had to tell my caregiving story. So I'm thinking, what's my caregiving story? I don't have one. Yes, I'm a caregiver for caregivers, and I'm a caregiver for people because I'm a social worker. But what's my caregiving story? And then I remembered a long time ago when my kids were little and I wasn't working, I was given the opportunity to go with my mother-in-law, and she had complex care needs. She was dependent on a wheelchair, but she wanted to go to Holland to attend her mother-in-law's 90th birthday. So my mother-in-law lived in Ontario, and so that's several provinces away from where I was living at the time. I went, and my husband and my kids, they took care of themselves, and like he arranged his working schedule around looking after the children, and I was able to go. And I didn't know my mother-in-law very well at all, because I had met my husband after he left home. I'd met her a few times, but I didn't know her. So I went before the trip to be taught and oriented on how to take care of her activities of daily living, her bathing, all that she needed, how to transfer her, and how to operate the wheelchair. Even I didn't know how to do that. Just all these things. And then the next day we went to Holland. So do you want me to talk more about this?
Oh, go right ahead. It sounds like you probably had a steep learning curve, but you probably were a fast learner.
I did embrace it, actually. So we're on the plane. And I've flown because I'm originally from England. So I've moved from England to Canada, and I've flown a fair bit. So I'm flying with my mother-in-law, and she's tiny. She's shrunk. She's had so many surgeries. She's just really tiny, and I'm not tiny. So she and I were together, and then there was this larger than me man, and we were sitting together at just how passengers are thrown together. And he sat on one side of mom, mom sat in the middle, and then I sat. And she had such short legs that we could actually sit quite comfortably in the plane, and that was good. So we flew, and we were, of course, the last ones to get off the plane because she needed assistance and we needed to wait for her wheelchair. And as soon as we got off the plane, we're in Holland, and there's nobody left from the plane for me to follow, pushing her in her wheelchair. I don't know where to go in Schiphol, like the airport in Amsterdam. I don't know where to go. And everybody's talking in Dutch. I don't know Dutch, and I don't know how to read Dutch. And she says, "Don't worry, Alison, I will translate for you." Thanks, Mom. Really appreciate that. So she had no cognitive deficits. It was just all physical and medical. So we're
Did
going.
they not have like international symbols that were intuitive?
They probably did, but I was more focused on not wrecking the wheelchair, like,
Right.
because this was still pretty foreign to me.
I'm trying to
So I
think about
wasn't,
when we went to Italy, and I think it was fairly intuitive, at least.
it probably is.
Mhm.
It probably is.
Don't ask
And
me about China and Japan.
no, thankfully, my mother-in-law is not from there. So we're going through the airport, and she promised me that she would translate for me. We meet her family and my family by marriage. They came to pick us up, and the minute she's there, she's just talking Dutch, 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 Dutch. And I go, "Mom, you promised you would translate for me." "Oh, yeah, 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 I'll translate for you." So guess what? She translated from Dutch to Dutch. I was like, "No, that's not
That's
going to work."
funny.
But I'm a student of reading people, so that wasn't a problem. And some of the words are the same in Dutch as they are in English. So that was our trip over, and that was my first caregiving situation, um, and many years ago. Oh, and so we spent 2 weeks together. And I was able to see a little bit of Holland, but I was able to get to know my mother-in-law and love her. Like, we laughed together. We had so much fun. And I wouldn't have known that about her, that we could be friends. 6 weeks after we got back to Canada, she passed away.
Oh, wow.
So I'm grateful, A, that she didn't pass away when I was looking after her. That would not have been good.
Mhm.
And B, I'm grateful that I got to know her the way that I did, because I have great memories now of her. And yeah.
Wow. That's a great story. And that is your caregiving story, no doubt. No doubt.
Yeah. And then one of the so telling the story and training to become a caregiver consultant, one of the other caregiver consultants in training said how refreshing it was to have a positive caregiving story. Like, there was nothing sad.
Yeah.
Except for afterwards. But
Yeah.
and then I had a second caregiving story that I really didn't know about either or recognize. People didn't call themselves caregivers. Like, this is in the 90s now.
You're talking about like terms like carer or caretaker or something else, or is it that they weren't involved in the hands-on care, so they didn't see themselves in that role?
Well, I know for me, it was, I didn't know what a caregiver was, like, in the 90s. And I'm at that point, the story I'm going to share now is with my mother. She had battled cancer and come through, but
Mhm.
then the cancer came back, and I chose to go and support my dad, who was her primary caregiver, and my mom. But it had progressed so much that this was the end of her life as well. So my dad and I are spelling off each other, sitting with her in the hospital,
Mhm.
and it was good for me to be there with her and to be there to support my dad. So I was a long distance caregiver, but again, that term meant nothing to me at that time. I was just doing what a daughter should do in my mind.
Mhm.
But I want to tell you about a volunteer at the hospital that she came in bounding in with joy and excitement, and she was just so excited to be a volunteer. But my mother with me sitting by her side, had just had a terrible experience. She had just vomited some bile, and I don't know how else to describe it, but it was just really scary for both of us. I know I was quite scared, and I'm sure my mom was incredibly scared. It was the closer she was getting to the end, I guess. But this volunteer came in not having a clue that something terrible had just happened, and I called for the nurse and I advocated for my dear mother and ushered this highly energized volunteer out of the room as kindly as I could. I think it was her first time ever volunteering, and she just had the really bad fortune of coming into my mom's room when something had just happened.
Well, she had to start somewhere.
She did. And I learned from her experience though, too, because being a high energy person myself, I have to recognize the tone of the room whenever I'm dealing with anybody, because you do come in and I want to bring joy and I want to encourage people. So I've got to tone that down. And that was a wake up call for me, seeing this
So you
young
don't
volunteer.
know how receptive somebody's going to be.
No, you've got to read the room.
Who are you? Get out of here, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you
Bad time, bad
read,
time.
like you said, read the room. Yeah, you'll be fine.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. So those are my two actual caregiving experiences. And then I do call myself a caregiver for caregivers as well.
And what the little bit of differences, there are some parallels with what you were saying, except that I didn't do any kind of caregiving until almost 20 years ago with my mom. And that was, well, as a completely unrelated job, 3 previous careers to now. And although you were talking about social work basically all the way through and the caregiving, I was in the hospitality industry, I was in financial services, I was in government, and they sound unrelated, but the one thing that the common thread was customer service and helping people, which is what I'm still doing today. So that's the common thread. I think about your story with the plane is that I brought my mom out here from Florida to Portland, Oregon, while she was still ambulatory and still reasonable cognitive level. We figured we better do it now, or it might become too late. Yes, we used the wheelchair service, everything else, but the biggest challenge in the airport and the airplane, being a son, was the bathroom. So, on the plane, I had to stand outside. You okay, Mom? Yes. She'd go into the ladies' restroom in the terminal, and I'd be standing outside, been a while, and I'd say to somebody, have you seen a little woman, looks like such and such? Oh yeah, she's fine. Looks like she'll be right out. So, but that was the biggest challenge. I mean, if I had to, I would have said, man coming.
Yeah.
Coming, right?
Problem solving. And
Yeah,
that is a
exactly.
challenge.
Exactly.
And
So
you were a dutiful son.
I tried.
Yeah.
I like to think, and you've seen the picture of my mother and I, and people are saying your mother would be proud, and I certainly would like to think so.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you do now as a caregiver of caregivers or caregiver consultant in your own view?
Well, my business name, as you mentioned, is Alongside Caregiver Consulting, and I come alongside. That's my hope, that I come alongside caregivers. I actually get them to share their caregiving story so that I can objectively comment on it and see where resources could fit in or strategies could fit in. And they're in the driver's seat. And I use a visual on my Facebook page where I'm in a motorcycle with a sidecar. I'm sitting in the sidecar and I'm pointing to the driver's seat. That's where the caregiver sits. So I come alongside. I never give advice. I offer suggestions. And it's their life. They're in control. And I don't ever want to take that away from them, because when you're caregiving, sometimes because of all of the healthcare needs, you have so little control. And just to support them in keeping control, keeping their identity. I help them retain their identity as much as possible. So I provide one-on-one counseling. I do education, and I facilitate support group, and I podcast. And all of these things are meant to help the caregiver. I want to talk a little bit about the suggestions that I make. Just recently, I was on a flight, another flight. It sounds like I fly a lot, but I don't.
Likewise.
I was seated beside someone who wanted to talk and wanted to talk a lot. And I would try to comment or validate what he was saying, and nothing. Like I could just tell I was actively listening, but he wasn't actively receiving. But that's okay. I didn't know this person. He felt it was important to share so much with this stranger sitting next to him, and it was kind of funny. But he got to one point, and I thought, ooh, I really need to comment on this. And so I asked him, may I make a suggestion? And he stopped talking. He looked at me and he said, sure. And I thought, is that all I needed to say to stop him from talking? But so I said what my suggestion was, and he got choked up, and he said, thank you. And then after he processed what I'd said, he got back to talking nonstop. And then at the end of the flight, he said, I really want to thank you for what you said to me earlier. And I said, well, I just want you to know that I'm a retired social worker, so you probably got more than you bargained for when you sat next to me. But he says, I'm gonna get off the plane and make a phone call right away because what you said really helped.
I would say
And
it was serendipity.
yeah, for him more so than for me. And I think my husband was quite pleased that I was sitting next to this fellow, not my husband, because we're opposites.
Interestingly, I think it was my last flight coming back from Washington, D.C., seeing some baseball games. And this young woman is there with me with a little chihuahua in her cage. I'm not going to get into the details, but she started opening up very quickly, definitely wanted to talk. And that whole flight, we didn't stop talking the whole time. I mean, I was ready to listen to podcasts, read, what have you, but I did a lot of listening. She got choked up. After we got off the flight, she hugged me, and
Oh,
I didn't think I gave her my card, said, if you want to, let me know how you're doing. It was about 3 or 4 months later, I get an email saying, remember me from the flight from Washington, D.C.? So I really want to appreciate it. We have met in person for lunch and continue our conversation. Just went through a
wow,
tough time, and she needed a good ear. Because it
wow.
doesn't matter whether you're high energy, introvert, extrovert, what have you. If you are a good listener and
Yeah,
ask good questions
yeah,
and you have empathy and compassion, it can happen. I think people can sense that instead
yeah.
of
Well,
somebody, well, you should do this and that, and well, we know
yeah.
how that's going to go.
Yeah. Well, he wouldn't have listened to me if I hadn't prefaced it with, may I make a suggestion?
Yes.
Like he just wouldn't have listened because I
Mhm.
was trying all along to offer validations and comments, and nothing's coming. But
That's right.
yeah, well, I'm glad you had that experience too, but you got a hug out of the deal and you've eaten
Absolutely.
lunch with her. So I
Yeah,
didn't get any of that.
that's great. So tell me more about your support groups.
Oh, my support
I run a
groups.
couple myself.
I know you do, and I think we're very similar in our appreciation for the folks who come to those support groups. But I had a support group today before speaking with you as well, and they just warm my heart. And the people, the caregivers, they're so caring. Um, Caregivers are the best resource for caregivers, and to have a support group is, I don't know, it's a gift for caregivers. So I started this support group when I first started as a caregiver consultant. There was a gal who I'd met through this volunteering that I was doing for the dementia group. And she said she could really benefit from a support group. And I said, well, I could do a support group. I've done groups through social work all along, so I know how to facilitate groups. And so she knew the area, she knew the community, and I was still relatively new to the community. And so she and I partnered together to network and to get a place to hold it, to talk it up. And we had our very first support group with, I can't remember how many people came, but we had managed to arrange to have it in a seniors independent living building, and they gave us a secure room. It was very small. There were 4 round tables and a whiteboard. And because it was our first support group, they offered to bring us snacks. Well, we thought that was pretty good. So all the people, I'm going to say 6 or 8 people came for that first meeting. We're just doing the housekeeping rules and just, introducing ourselves to one another. And lo and behold, the fire alarm rings. And
Go
so
figure.
we have to find our way through this building, and it's a bit of a maze, like it's not a small building. Find our way out to the muster point and take it. I would say we were out there for at least an hour and wait for the all clear. And then
Was it a real fire or just a drill?
I think there was smoke.
Oh.
Somebody was making toast or something. So when we got the all clear, we went back into the lobby, and the lobby was quite beautiful. Not like this tight little room that we were given with these 4 tables and whiteboard, and it was really quite tight. So everyone says, let's stay here. And I'm thinking, confidentiality, we've got to keep confidentiality. It's all about confidentiality. And
Yeah, I get it.
so I talked to them about that, and there was really no one else around, so everybody was quite comfortable. They wanted to bond here. There was a fireplace. It was a really nice lobby. So we sat there for a little while for the end of the meeting, and good bonding. The cookies or snacks never came. They were delivered to somebody else because of the fire. But yeah, but that was our first, and we've been going strong with that group for 5 years. And people come and go. Recently, one of our earlier caregivers passed away. There's need for so many more support groups. We're at capacity with that one, and I keep telling folks, they find out that there's a support group. Well, can you put me on a wait list? And how sad is that? Like that they need it. There are support groups with our health authority. There are support groups with the Alzheimer's Society, but folks want something that's, I think, more grassroots. And there's just such amazing care in our support group. A lot of our people now have their loved one in care already.
Mhm.
So one gal saw that there was a real loneliness being expressed by some of the more of the gentlemen in the group. And so she's been arranging mid-month luncheons where we go out to a pub, or they go out to a pub. I wasn't able to go to the last one. And it's just a casual, social, everybody pays for their own lunch, another real good time of bonding. And it's seeing the need, meeting the need, and coming up with a great solution. And everyone is really appreciating those luncheons. And in the summer, we do a social, like we'll do a potluck, just to keep things going so that people still can be connected. And I really encourage them to reach out to each other during the time in between our meetings. After a meeting, I send out, with their permission, I've got actual permissions to send out emails to everyone with resources, links, and things that we've discussed in the meeting. There's never personal stuff in it, but it's just kind of like a record of good resources that were shared in the meeting. So
I love that with the social aspect. A lot of the people of mine are also at it. One of the groups I do is at an independent living, and there's aging in place cottages. This is a community center. We use the meeting room. Occasionally we get moved out into the living room area around the fireplace or outside, and yeah, we keep in mind that confidentiality, but nobody seems to mind. And then, yeah, about once a year, we'll do like the holidays, the winter holidays, we'll do a potluck. So yeah, I love that because it creates that bond among everybody, and they spend so much time together and they get to know each other so well. So it's very fitting. It's real nice. So you were mentioning about people passing away. Unfortunately, what I found with my Alzheimer's Association here in the States, that some people were continuing to come after their person with dementia passed away, knowing it isn't a bereavement group, but to help others. And that's what I did after my mom passed away 11 years ago. And I said, okay, I'll keep going for a little while and help others like others help me. I became the facilitator. Not what I was expecting.
But what you were meant to do.
Right. But if you think about it, it's that and fundraising for, research and type of thing, as well as the programs with the Alzheimer's Association, that's what led to now. I thought when I was going to be leaving my unrelated state job, I was just going to do more volunteering. And look what I became, caregiving support consultant, similar to what you're doing.
Yeah.
So tell me about your podcast and why you choose the names, and what is the purpose of your podcast and practice? Tell us how it benefits caregivers or the general public. Anybody wants to listen in, right?
Oh, I hope everybody wants to listen in. So back in the time of that COVID pandemic, I wanted to be able to continue to provide supports and resources to caregivers. And the health authority said, no, you can't visit, you can't be with, you can't spend time face to face. So, got to come up with something. So I've been thinking about a podcast, and the name Island Treasures was actually the easiest part to come up with, because I live on Vancouver Island. What caregivers share are treasures, like they're nuggets, and Island Treasures just made sense to me. But the podcast originated with me interviewing a caregiver from the caregiver support group. And the first fellow who was my guest was the fellow who just passed away. So he's a real dear. But so he said to me, he says, I don't know what a podcast is. And I said, I'm not sure I do either. But he says, I will be your guest. I have no problems being your guest and telling my story. And so he did. And such a delightful caregiver spirit. He wanted to share what he'd learned with other caregivers. And so he was my first guest. And so as my podcast has evolved or developed, I got some feedback from someone who said, the full episodes are kind of long. So the full episodes are about 40 to 60 minutes. They range in. And she said to me, do caregivers have that much time to sit and listen to something like that? And well, no, not necessarily, but they can put the headphones on and listen while they're doing something else. But that made me think, I'm going to do a mini podcast. So from each full episode, the week after that airs, I will do a mini podcast episode that I just pick highlights out of what my guest said and do a mini episode that follows. And it's between 4 to 8 minutes in length. And they're very popular. I think they're quite good. I'm probably extremely biased, but I know that I enjoy listening to them. I have to listen to them a lot because I actually do my own editing and my own publishing. And I found that I really enjoy that.
Well, you're more talented than me, because I think, other than this, I am primarily a podcast guest, and I like to say, you've probably heard it, I've been on podcasts from New England to New Zealand, other than doing this here. And again, I was very honored to be a guest of yours, but very soon after me, you had a very auspicious guest who's not just nationally, but internationally known. And
yes, she
bravo
is.
to you.
Well, bravo to you for being a guest on the Island Treasures podcast first.
Yeah, I'll say that your person you're going to mention in a moment, she was in good company.
Yeah, exactly. So Bill is referring to none other than Teepa Snow. Yes, you heard it. I had Teepa Snow as a guest on the Island Treasures podcast, and I loved her. Just an amazing guest, as are all my guests. Like Bill, you're no exception either. I'm so grateful. I marvel at who has graced the Island Treasures podcast. I still pinch myself because there's been amazing people. And yeah, I do encourage folks that are listening to listen to the Island Treasures podcast, and also to the Self-Caregiving Strategies podcast, which was a limited series podcast that Teresa Wilbanks and I co-hosted. Teresa created the sustainable caregiving strategies from her experience caregiving for her dad, who lived to 99 years of age. And she has quite the compelling caregiving story as well. But so we took those strategies that she had created and called them self-caregiving strategies and put them into a podcast, and also very well received. So,
and as you know, I've had some interaction with her as well through caregiving.com. She's out of the Tampa, Florida area, right? Yep, that's what I thought.
Yep, that's her base. She actually she travels around a fair bit. I still have yet to meet her in person, but she's definitely gonna cross the border one of these days so that I can meet her, or I have to cross the border so I can meet her.
So
But
I hope so. So how would you sum up, because it's so self-evident, why is this such a personal, professional passion for you?
well, I think I'm like you, and I found my purpose and passion in this role. Because both of us, by the sounds of it, really like to help other people. You said that, and all my life I've wanted to help people. It is a passion. It just knowing that I can make a difference, that I can make something better for someone, is really what fuels me. I have an ability to sense people's pain, and it's a bit of a curse, because sometimes people don't want to talk about that, and sometimes I want to because I can feel it. It's almost like tangible for me, and so I want to hone in on that and do what I can to make them feel a little bit better. And even if it's just a tiny little bit better, it's an improvement for them. So, yeah.
I'm gonna be honest, I've got a cat that's acting out here.
Oh, Lucy or Desi?
Desi, a little
Mm.
black male. Yeah, he's just been put in his room and he's a little still hyper. So I have unfortunately had to share. That's okay. It humanizes, it personalizes the whole thing, right?
That's real. It's real. And
That's our children.
yeah. Yes, I don't have any anymore.
Mm. So tell us, although we'll put some of the information in the conversation notes, how can listeners reach you and learn more?
Oh, I would love for listeners to reach me. So my email address, and it's very long, and I'm sorry for that. It's alongside caregiver consulting at shaw.ca, and that's my email. You can also reach me through my website, which is also long, alongside caregiverconsulting.ca. And there's a contact button on there that you can that actually takes you to my email. So that's a little bit easier. While you're on my website, there's all my podcasts, there's videos, there's resources, and it's kind of like a one-stop shop for everything alongside caregiver consulting. I'm on Instagram, and I'm on Facebook, and I'm on LinkedIn, all of them under alongside caregiver consulting. And my YouTube channel is under my name, Alison van Schie. But again, most of my videos are on my website. And some of the mini episodes, I believe including the one with Mr. Bill Cohen, is also in video format. So if you want to check that out, please do.
Hope they will. Definitely check that your site out. So thank you again, Allison, and enjoyed our conversation again. It was great to meet you in person. This is the next best thing, right? So
Yeah, it was good to see you again.
I'm sure we'll do it again sometime soon. You take care now and have a good evening.
Thanks, Bill. You too.